Ah, yeah. Okay. I hope you can still enjoy it. So yeah, especially because I cannot see you, I really ask you to interrupt me for any questions you might have. Okay, so with this, I want to start with my talk, and it's basically focused off this method VAMPNets, where we try to make use of these neural networks to learn the kinetics of some molecule we are interested in. Okay. But yeah, first of all, perhaps I should mention again that these methods are not like solely applicable to biomolecular systems, but you can of course also use them to study other systems like flows, like ocean temperature, currents, or weather phenomena. And yeah, there's also like a colleague of mine working with a historian together, so you can really use these methods also for other domains. But yeah, in our group, the focus is mainly on biological systems. So yeah, I will also focus in this talk on biological systems. And yeah, so I will start my talk with yeah, trying to motivate again why we are doing all this stuff and why it's worth like spending time or investing time into it. And for that, I will do a short recap, and I hope it's also helpful for you because I'm pretty sure this week is pretty dense. And so it's always good to repeat stuff. And for that, I want to motivate again why we are interested in like building these Markov state models or using a VAMPnet. And it's connected in these biological systems, at least to this sampling problem. And so let's like repeat again what's the sampling problem. And we start with this biological system you can see here on the right side. And this is now you're lucky enough to have like the structure of this protein, and you put it now into a simulation box where you put some water around it and some ions, and you try to mimic the environment into this cell where the protein is actually. And now you can run a simulation. And basically, when you do this, you try to learn the station distribution of this protein, which gives you access to a lot of thermodynamic properties. And yeah, with that, you can basically say which are the metastable states, and you can also study how fast are this interchanging between these metastable states. Okay, now here comes the problem. You could think of it, okay, just let's make a very long simulation, and then I'm done and I can study the whole system. Problem is, if we do these simulations, we have to, in order to integrate all these time steps, we have to do very small time steps so that atoms are not clashing into each other and then it would explode or something like this. And so the time step has to be very small, and it's actually in the range of femtoseconds. But usually, like the process we're interested in the protein are at least in this second, in the order of seconds. So we have to make a really long simulation in this sense. Like we have to do a lot of time steps to reach these seconds regime. And problem is that our machines, our computers nowadays are not powerful enough, and who knows when they would be, to actually do this like in a time span which is actually feasible. So right now it would take ages to make a simulation to actually see processes in the range of seconds. And so one of these tricks of using a Markov state model is now to change a little bit the perspective. So we do not aim to directly learn the station distribution, but indirectly by learning the conditional distribution, which is saying, okay, how likely do I jump from a conformation xt tau later to a conformation xt plus tau? And the nice thing about it is basically now, if you now jump to Markov state models, which make use of it, is that we don't need to do one very long simulation where we can see like the stationary distribution, but instead we can now run several short trajectories in parallel. And So by this, we can make use of all these clusters where we have a lot of cores and run several trajectories. And we can now make use of all these trajectories to learn these just these conditional distributions. So here on the right side, you can see like work of a former colleague. And basically of Markov state models is that we will combine several configurations into one state. And then we learn this jumping basically by learning this transition between these states. And for that, in this work, it worked like, okay, I started my simulation in one configuration. And then at some point I saw, okay, the confirmation changed. And then I will spawn from this point, again, many trajectories. And then by this, I can really explore like the landscape of the protein. Okay. And the nice thing is, if we now have learned this conditional distribution, we have also access to the stationary distribution and the kinetics. And by this, we can really like understand the protein. Okay, so this is all nice, and this is why we're interested in using Markov state models in this domain. But yes, so also Markov state models come with a price tag, and so I hope, or I'm sure you learned already about it, that like building a Markov state model is not that easy, and yeah, one could say it's even an art to build them. And so let's quickly revisit like basically the pipeline you have to do. And this is very connected why it's sometimes very hard to build these Markov state models. So usually you start with your data, which would be in our case from a simulation, you get all the XYZ coordinates of the atoms. And then you have to choose first the features you want to use for your model, because sometimes to describe all the kinetics, the coordinates itself are not the best choice. Yeah. So this is what you always have done with PyEMMA featureizer. You choose some features like distances, angles. And so then you're left still with a lot of dimensions. So you're still in a very high dimensional space where it's not possible to cluster it into several states. You just have not enough data to cluster it in this space. So what you have to do is you have to get rid of some dimensions. And for this reason, you usually use something like Tika. So because if you reduce the dimensions, you still want to keep kinetic information into these lower dimensions, less dimensions. And for that reason, you usually use something like Tika. Now, after this step, you are now in a less dimensional space where clustering is feasible. And you cluster it, for example, with k-means. And then you can build your Markov state model with an estimator of your choice. And then depending on how many clusters you have chosen, it could be 100, for example, then you have an MSM with 100 states, which is still for a human, if you see this graph of connected nodes, it's like, yeah, it's overwhelming. So usually you also want to coarse-grain it further. So you end up with less states. So you use some coarse-graining method, something like PCCA or something. And then in the end, you finally have a model which is somehow easy understandable for you because it has not too many states. And yeah, you can be happy, but it could turn out that the model actually is not what you were hoping for. And then basically the question is, okay, in which step did I take a bad choice, right? Because in all these steps, you have to make choices. How many dimensions you want to project on, how many cluster centers you're using, and so on. And they all influence the final result. And it's sometimes very hard to like untangle where actually the problem lies. Okay, so in order to circumvent it, it would be nice to have basically a method where perhaps you have to make some choices in the beginning, but then you feed your data into it and it directly outputs a coarse-grained model. And then you basically know, okay, it's somehow these few parameters you have to choose. And this is basically what VAMPNets aims at. So it tries to replace this pipeline by using this one method. Yeah, sorry. Okay, and we will do so by using like these neural networks you've definitely heard of. Okay, So far the motivation. So now we have to dig in how we can do this actually. So first of all, so I'm not 100% sure. Perhaps nowadays everyone knows what a neural network is, but just in case, I will give a brief introduction into the basics. So here on the left side, you can see like a scheme of a neural network. And it's basically the most simple architecture you can think of, where you have a so-called fully connected feed-forward neural network. Okay, it consists of so-called layers, and we have here like the input layer, then we have here a hidden layer, and the green one is the output layer. So let's go to the input layer. There we have these layers consist of nodes, and in the input layer, each node gets as an input. Basically, it could be from our simulation. We have like an x coordinate, a y coordinate, and a z coordinate, for example. Then this layer, input layer, is connected to the hidden layer by these edges, which are, in a mathematical speaking, is like a matrix. So we have here our input vector x, which is multiplied by the matrix W1. And what it does here, so all input nodes are connected to this hidden node, and this matrix weights all these inputs, and then we sum them up into this one node. So it's a weighted sum of all the inputs by the weighted vector of W1. And this you do for all hidden nodes. And by this, you get basically the representation in a hidden layer. Okay, so the trick now is that these weights, which are weighting our inputs, they are learnable. It's like they are trainable. So later on, we will train this neural network, and which means we will update these weights. Okay, so when we are at the hidden, now we are at the hidden stage, and there we basically repeat this procedure. We apply a weight matrix, W2 now, to the output of the first layer here. And then we make again like the weighted sum and apply, oh wait, sorry, I forgot something. After we did this weighted sum, so we summed over all the inputs with these weights, we apply a nonlinear function. This is a crucial part. I'm sorry that I missed that. And so we use here a nonlinear function, and then this output will be further processed by the next weights. And then we apply another nonlinear function. Okay, so now why are neural networks so famous? And this is highly connected to this universal approximation theorem, which basically, Sloppy is saying, states that if this kind of three-layer neural network can approximate any function, at least if like you have sufficient amount of hidden nodes. Yeah. And this is basically great, right? So it's not like a Taylor expansion where, yeah, you somehow can perhaps approximate the function for a specific range or something, or perhaps even just a point or something. Now, no, you can really approximate any function. Okay. So now the question is, what I already mentioned is, okay, so I don't want to approximate any function. I want to approximate a very specific function. So how do I do this? And this we do via training the parameters, which are these weight matrices, which I called W in the slide before. Okay, and so for training, we basically need a target function. So we need to say, okay, how good is the function the network resembles right now? Is how good is this function according to some loss function? Yeah. So if you assume you train like a classifier which has to classify, okay, is this a dog or a cat, right? And we give a picture of a dog, and the network tells us this is a cat. Then we say, okay, then the loss function should be very high. Yeah. So by training the network, we try, like to reduce this loss function, and by this it will say later, the network will also say, for all cats this is a cat, and for all dogs will say this is a dog. Okay, so how does the training procedure works? So first of all, we will initialize these weights randomly. So in the beginning, this is just a random function. And then we have our data. And usually we split these in at least training and validation data. So we use some data for training and some for validation to see if we somehow overfit our problem. And in for some cases, you also need a third set, if you use a so-called test set, if you somehow use the validation set for some tuning of some other parameters. Okay. So now we go to this training loop, which we will basically we loop into in the training loop until some criterion is reached, which could be just we want to go 20 times through our training data, and then we just stop, for example. And so for each loop, for each of these loops, we now take some parts of our training data, so-called batches. Yeah? So we split our training data into batches. And for each batch, we compute the output value of the neural network. Then we compute the loss function, so which tells us how good are we actually now on this batch. Afterwards, we compute the gradient of these loss functions with respect to the weights. So, which means it has to be, we have to be able to estimate gradients. Yeah, this is important. And then we update our weights by these gradients. Yeah, so that in principle, our loss, our neural network should now perform better on this batch at least. Yeah, and now we do this for all the batches, and then we have a whole run through our whole training set. And afterwards, we can, for example, evaluate this on our validation set to just have a feeling during training if we start to overfit or not. Yes. Okay. So, okay, so now this is a very brief introduction to neural networks, and yeah, if there are any questions left, please ask them. Otherwise, I will go to the next slide where we now try to motivate where actually neural networks can help us. And for this, so in the beginning, you already saw that we call these VAMPNets, and you can already guess this has something to do with VAMP. And VAMP, has something to do with Koopman theory. So in the in the beginning, I told you that we try to make this trick of learning this conditional distribution, right? And the Koopman operator, so we are now not exactly trying to learn this conditional distribution, but instead try to learn the Koopman operator. But this one is very tightly connected to this conditional distribution. And the basic idea somehow is hidden in this first equation. So you have to imagine. So we start with we observed our system in some coordinates x, which could be all the atom positions. And then there exists, mathematically speaking, an operator which propagates these coordinates in time tau later. So how will the coordinates look tau later? The problem is in these observed coordinates, this operator can be very non-linear. So if we try to approximate this operator, then in that space with a matrix, with a linear operator, the matrix, it could be a very bad approximation. So what Koopman came up with was, okay, let's try to find a function which maps our observed coordinates into some other space, to some other form of coordinates, where the operator becomes linear. And this is this would be really favorable because linear operators are nice, and we can there's a lot of tools how to study them. And this is basically what this first equation says. So we are basically looking for some transformation chi where the operator becomes linear. Okay, so if this is a bit terrifying or something, then you can also see the Markov state model as something like this, right? It's these chi's are then our state classifications, right? So it's like, it says like, okay, in which state is our configuration X? This is what chi says in the Markov state model. Then this linear, like this matrix, like the linear operator, then is it's like your transition matrix, which tells you how likely are you jumping to all the other states, which tells you, okay, how, like, in which state should be the configuration at xt plus tau. Okay. Okay, now, so now there's basically the question, how do we get now these chi and these k? So first of all, given that we have the chi's, the optimal k is easily given, right? This is written down here. It's just a multiplication of these two matrices, which we can just estimate out from our data. Yeah. And this leaves the choice of chi. And the tricky part basically is we cannot simply use this prediction error as a loss. Because if you can easily imagine, if we would just try to minimize like this prediction error, the best choice would be just to map chi to a constant vector, like that chi maps x to a constant vector, independent of what x is. Then you have here the constant vector, here the same constant vector, then the optimal matrix is just a constant matrix, like the unit matrix. And you have a zero prediction error. But basically this has nothing to do with your system, basically, right? So you cannot just simply use this expression. There are some tricks, some papers about how you can still make it work. But another way how to do is using VAMP. Yeah, and somehow mathematically speaking, I think it's a more appealing way to do it. And basically what VAMP says is that that you can define a score, the VAMP score, which is maximal if these chi's can span the real dominant singular functions, like the dominant singular function of the real Koopman operator. So it basically tells you, it gives you like this score where you can see, okay, which choice of chi is better than the other, because it's approximating the real Koopman operator better. And for neural networks, we just need that we can calculate gradients with respect to chi. And this is the case for this loss. So now you can easily see how we are connecting all these two things of VAMP and neural networks, and which we call VAMPNets. So we have these neural networks. They represent functions, and they can represent these chi. And we can estimate how good is our network right now doing, and we know how to improve it by taking the gradient and updating our weights with respect to this loss function. Okay, so this is the idea of VAMPNets. Okay, this is just that's like a scheme. So we have here our coordinates, how we like observe the system, xt, and like time-lagged version. And we call this a lobe. Like this is a neural network. And we have the lobe of time t and the lobe of t plus tau. We transform our data with this neural network and call it a chi of x of t. And we also calculate it for the time lag data, estimate the score here, and then we can take the gradient with respect to the weights in the neural network and update our neural network to approximate, like to increase the VAMP score, and by that, like approximate the Koopman operator better. Okay. So let's see how we do with this scheme I showed you in the beginning as a motivation. Is actually the VAMPNets replacing these pipelines somehow? So first of all, like the dimensionality reduction, basically the scheme already showed it somehow. You start with some dimensionality here, and you can basically choose how many nodes the output layer should have. And by that, you can reduce the dimensionality. So-called coarse graining, like the coarse graining in the normal sense, gives you like how likely belongs a state to a metastable set. Yeah, so it somehow gives you like a soft clustering of the states. And these soft clustering we can mimic by making a specific choice of nonlinear function for the output layer of the neural network, which is called softmax. Yeah. So this basically gives you a probability vector, how likely is this configuration in a specific state, like metastable state. Okay. And in the end, if we have like so these VAMPNets can be constructed that it gives you like somewhat like a coarse-grained model, and there we know we can calculate the like something like a transition matrix, which is now called K, like something like the Koopman matrix, and we can estimate like time scales there as well, and like the Eigen Functions. Okay, so this is already all you need to understand VAMPNets. So if you have no questions, then I will just quickly go to results and show you how it actually works in a toy example. Okay. So yeah, you've seen this, I guess, already like a lot these last days, but yeah, I quickly go over it. Like this is alanine dipeptide. All the interesting stuff happens in phi and psi. You can see here that like the energy landscape, which tells you here metastable set, here's a metastable state here, and then this one. Okay, so now the idea is, so we know phi and psi are the important angles, but we will not give these phi and psi angles into the neural network, but instead we give really the positions, in this case of the heavy atoms, into the neural network. Yeah. So the network gets the coordinates of the heavy atoms, doesn't know anything about these angles, and we ask it, let's give me 6 states. And we can train it then with the VAMP score. And if we now plot like all the different states, you will get something like this. So just afterwards to visualize it, we visualize it again in phi and psi because we know these are the important degrees of freedom. And so now here, this is basically the output of the first state. So I give it this configuration. I estimate how does phi and psi looks like. And then I can see how likely does it belong to the state 1. And then you can see that it just in this area, it belongs to state 1, and all the others it does not. And then you can see that really the neural network finds all these spots which we know already from this energy landscape I showed you before. Yeah, and it's quite nice. And of course, as I said, you can afterwards study like this Koopman matrix, as well as you study like the transition matrix. And here on the left side, you see like the time scales. And so we ask for 6 states. Then you can always get 5 processes, which like one process is always like the constant process, which has the eigenvalue 1, which would be a timescale of infinity, which is a stationary distribution. And then you get 5 more timescales, which are somewhat interesting, which tell you how fast is the process decaying. Yeah. And I guess you've seen it before. You have these 5, like these 2 are very fast, just in the first few frames you would see it, and then the others are quite long-lived. And on the right side, I don't know how often you've seen this, is basically I'm showing Eigen Functions. So they tell me what is the process actually. So this tells me how fast is the process, or how slow, I should better say. And this tells me what is actually happening in this process. And this is going from dark red to blue or otherwise, or vice versa. So this is a process going from this area to the right area. The second process is going inside the left part from the lower part to the upper part. And the third one is going from this dark red dot to these blue dots here. It's just the process on the right part. And these very fast processes is jumping between these two basins inside the left side. Okay. So one other thing you can do also with neural network is so we ask for 6 states, but it does not mean that we cannot compress the data through less states, right? So one could wonder, so how many dimensions do I actually need to still capture all dynamics in the system? And this is what we did here is basically we put like a 2-node bottleneck in the neural network. Yeah, so we start with our inputs. These were like 30 inputs. Go make a layer with just 2 nodes, and then afterwards go back to 6 nodes. Yeah, and this is what I call a 2-node bottleneck here. And then I can look in these 2 nodes, what are the activations for each input. Yeah. So on the left side, you see the classification of the neural network, how it looks at the outside, yeah, at the 6 states. And then on the right side, you see how the activations of these 2 nodes in the bottleneck look like. And you can see basically that these 6 states are easily separable in this representation. Yeah. And actually, if you do alanine dipeptide, you can even go to 1 node, and you are not as good in approximating all processes, but you're pretty close. Yeah? So you can nearly approximate this whole thing with just like compress it into just 1 node. Okay, so but alanine dipeptide is a bit boring. So I'm also having here another example of like a little bit larger system, which is called Villine. And so you can also like try VAMPNets on these or even bigger if you have the data of them. And yeah, it's where you can basically also build like these graphs of what are these states. Then you can look at representative structures. So for which structures is the probability of this state very high? And then you can show them in your program of your choice. And you can basically, yeah, then you can basically start to study your system. And you can, for example, in this case, you can see here's the fully folded structure. And you can basically see there exists a misfolded one where some stuff is folded, which should not be folded according to the folded one. And in order to go from this misfolded to the folded one, you have to go back to the unfolded one or to some other folded one before you can go back to the fully folded. And yes, this would be the end of my talk if you don't have any questions. And I hope I'm not alone actually in this call anymore. So are there any questions?
Yes, I would have a question.
Yes, sure.
I'm curious how that would, because I mean, I can only judge by seeing it from here. The systems are probably quite small. How would you say they react to something bigger? Because eventually the neural network should work on all sizes, not depending on the amount of atoms. Just probably taking longer for the calculations and such, but that should be it. So did you test it as well on the bigger systems?
Yeah, so I'm more on the part of developing the method, not so much on applying it. But so we also tried it on bigger systems, and so in principle it works also on bigger systems. And you can also there could be the problem of you are having too many weights actually, like for the data you have to actually fit the neural network. But you can do tricks like sharing weights, and by this you can circumvent it, and you can train like now also larger systems. This works, but there are problems you also encounter in Markov state models, which are connected to disk like connectivity. I don't know if you have heard it. Like usually if you estimate a Markov state model, it always takes the largest connected set, right? Which means you should, like I told you, you are trying to approximate the conditional transition probability. And for that, you sometimes take you can use several simulations and run them in parallel, and to learn all these transitions which can happen, right? But the problem is sometimes there are transitions happening which are just connected in one direction. Yeah, so you never saw in your simulations the jump back, and then they occur problems. Like in Markov state models, you basically remove these ones by saying, okay, it doesn't belong to the largest connected set. This is not so easy with the VAMPnet. So the VAMPnet basically, if you just put all the data into it and you let the VAMPnets find all these sets, it will also find these disconnected ones. And then you need to start to, so there's one strategy to just throw away this data, right? And we are working right now also on a method which it looks so far that it can circumvent this problem at all, but there are some other problems which can occur if you go to larger systems, I must say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Yes, when you build your neural network, which algorithm you use to optimize the weights with respect to the loss function, that is crucial or not? I mean, the optimization algorithm, maybe it's something somewhat standard or not, I don't know.
Yeah, so, okay, this part I skipped a little bit, yeah, I'm sorry. So in neural networks, right, I just said you will